Brandon Bernier, 430 East 6th Avenue in Roselle. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have a few questions tonight. First, over the holidays, I received a happy birthday/happy holidays letter from the councilman at large on borough letterhead. I'm curious if this was paid for by the councilman himself or the taxpayers, and if borough funds were used, how much total has been sent on similar letters in the past? Also, I'm wondering if it's proper to unnecessarily access what I can only assume to be voter records to determine when my birthday was to begin with. But more importantly, I'd like to go back to Resolution 2016-461, the vote of no confidence in Mayor Danzero. I want to thank Councilman Bishop and Councilwoman Walker and Shaw for the productive conversations we've had regarding this. However, I'd like to call your attention to quite a number of problems I have with this resolution. First, Article 1, Section 5 of the bylaws states that resolutions offered shall be in writing, a copy of which shall be given to each council member prior to its introduction. This didn't happen. It goes on to say that all proposed resolutions will be discussed at the workshop session for consideration at the regular meeting, and no further resolutions will be considered unless specifically authorized by a majority of council members present. Again, it didn't happen. Going further, this wasn't even moved as a resolution at the meeting in the first place. A verbal motion was made, but there was no resolving clause to actually make it a verbal resolution. Verbal motions are routinely made throughout meetings, none of which are written up as resolutions after the fact. However, let's go ahead and assume that we can retroactively turn this verbal motion into a written resolution. The resolution has to read the exact wording voted on in the original motion. I count at least a dozen instances where the published resolution differs from the councilwoman's wording, including entire whereas clauses that were added after the fact. And again, what's been published as a resolution is actually just the preamble to a resolution, lacking any actual enacting or resolving clause. Furthermore, it was stated that there is no section of this meeting designated for new business. But Article 3 of the bylaws does in fact list a specific section for resolutions. The chair should have ruled the original motion, which was made during council comments, out of order. After that, the councilman at large called the question without being recognized. Again, out of order. It's not a privileged motion, and you have to obtain the floor before moving to call the question. But even had he been recognized, the motion to call the question should have been ruled dilatory. The motion to call the question exists to end debate that goes back and forth with the same opinions being stated over and over again, not to completely stifle debate and silence opposition. It was a blatant and egregious misuse of parliamentary procedure. Then to top it all off, there was a motion to adjourn the meeting before even finishing the remaining council comments, which are supposed to include committee reports. Instead, we heard no committee reports, and residents of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th wards were left without any updates. Now, I bring all of these technical details up because the mayor was charged with being unable to properly chair the monthly council meetings and attempting to thwart borough policies and procedures to suit her own agenda. And I can tell you that it's extremely difficult to chair a meeting when the council doesn't know or properly follow the bylaws and Robert's Rules of Order. And just in making this single motion, I watched members of this council thwart policies and procedures to suit their own agenda. Does that not seem the least bit ironic? I'm not here to argue the merit of any of the charges, but there are legitimate problems with how this was done. I agree that the mayor could do a better job of chairing and controlling these meetings, as I just laid out. I agree that the mayor could do a better job of maintaining decorum, but let me remind everyone that the mayor has no right to stifle free speech at this podium so long as there is no profanity or obscenity. But I do expect leadership, as we saw tonight, which I appreciate, speaking out against toxic personal attacks that honestly do nothing but embarrass this borough. Maintaining decorum also goes both ways, and I would hope that we never again see half the council leaving the dais when hometown heroes are being recognized, as we saw at December's meeting. I went back and watched the last year's worth. Mayor, can I have an additional few minutes? Thank you. I went back and watched the last year's worth of council meetings, and what I've seen are motions being made without any explanation. For instance, saying "so moved" without a motion being explicitly stated by the chair is absolutely meaningless. One or the other has to specify what action is being taken. I've seen interruption after interruption after interruption. You have to be recognized by the chair in order to speak, and all comments must be addressed to or through the chair, and that goes for the public as well. I've seen points of order being called to simply interrupt and speak, Points of order can be called at any time, including during public comment, but the rule believed to have been broken has to be specified, at which point the chair makes a ruling. I've seen members of the public silenced after 3 minutes when the bylaws specifically state that an additional 3 minutes can be given at the discretion of the chair. I'd also remind you that a motion to temporarily suspend any rule, if need be, is always in order as well. And most recently, I've seen a councilman not assigned to a single committee as if he has nothing to contribute on behalf of his residents. But at the same time, I would ask that that councilman stop saying he's counting his days down to be done here. I absolutely understand the intent, but show us you're going to continue to fight for what's best for the residents of this borough, despite any political differences, until your term is over. I really don't think this vote of no confidence did anything to unify or move the borough forward. Instead, it honestly made this mayor and council look more like children that can't play nicely in the sandbox together, and quite frankly, that's been extremely disappointing to watch. It's disheartening that I need to fear rocks being thrown through my windows for speaking at this microphone. If it takes the youngest person to get up here and address this council in at least the last year, asking everyone, including members of the public, to grow up, then by all means, for my sake, for the sake of the 1,000+ families with homes in foreclosure in this town, for the sake of the 52% of families in this borough still struggling to afford basic household necessities, please grow up. Respect each other and find a way to work together. And that starts with learning the rules, following them, and finding common ground. Thank you.
Thank you.